Hi, and welcome to another terribly fun films review. I'm Bobby, your host, and this is a Seeking Asylum video. That's where I take a look at the entire filmography of the studio that brought us frickin' Sharknado, The Asylum. Considering that we just looked at the theatrically released Jack the Giant Slayer film, I thought, what better movie to do right now than the Asylum's tie-in to that Jack the Giant Killer, which should not be confused with the 1960s Kerwin Matthews starring movie Jack the Giant Killer, which is its own bag of big, goofy, dumb fun that maybe I'll get to eventually. This has nothing to do with that movie. This is based on the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, and was created as a mockbuster, or as the Asylum prefers to call them, a tie-in to Jack the Giant Slayer. So, without further ado, let's see why this movie is so terribly fun. The first thing to note about the film is that it's directed by Mark Atkins. Mark Atkins has done at least a dozen Asylum films. I would actually have to sit and count that, but I'd be surprised if it was anything less than that number. He has done several other movies as well outside of The Asylum, including a personal favorite of mine called P-51 Dragon Fighter. That video review is coming, and I promise you it'll be glorious and epic. And then it is also scripted by him, and I have found that 99% of the time he does do his own scripts. Most of the time that works out for him. As for the plot, it is Jack and the Beanstalk with a few new twists. Jack lives with his mom and stepdad Nigel, as his dad, Jack's dad, has disappeared slightly over 18 years ago. And no one knows where he went. Jack, who is played by Jamie Atkins, is working on a robo-exoskeleton. I'm not sure if it's help farm work or just because he really likes robotics, but that's what he's working on. He's working on that with his friend Lisa, played by Vicky Glover. And then they get called in to celebrate dinner and for Jack's 18th birthday, when Jess, played by John Camplin, that's right guys, the frickin' zombie king himself is in this movie, John Camplin, comes and gives Jack a package that Jess promised to deliver to Jack when he turned 18. He promised his dad. And this package contains the beans that make the beanstalk grow. With them being kind of sort of accidentally planted, the beanstalk grows, and Jack is whisked away to the land in the clouds, which is how it's referred to in the movie. There he runs into his dad. His dad's name is Newald, who is played by Harry Dyer. And he's only been away in the land in the clouds for 19 days, which means that roughly a day in the land in the clouds is 1 year on Earth. And there he met Serena, played by Jane March, who convinced him to get rid of the giants that were living in this land because they were a plague upon it. Turns out this isn't true. Rather, she wanted complete and total control over the land and over these dog, dinosaur, triceratops, rhinoceros beings, which you can probably see better here on the back. As the giants weren't actually evil and they were keeping those creatures in check. Oh, shit. Oh well. So now it's a race against time, as Serena has found a way to get to our world, and Jack and his dad now need to get back to save mankind. that's really it for the story. There are some subplots, and there's a lot of back and forth between what's going on in the land in the clouds and what's going on back on Earth as people are looking for Jack and trying to deal with the beanstalk and that sort of thing. The really unique and interesting thing about the movie is its look. I have no idea. None. Not a single iota of a grain of one single thought process of an idea of what time the Asylum's Jack the Giant Killer takes place. None. There are motorcycles, there are cars, there are tanks, there's a freaking exoskeleton robot thing, which is clearly meant to be an homage to Alien, and it mostly works. But the costumes, the way people talk, and that sort of thing, and even some of the machinery we see, the phones we see, really make it feel like it's meant to be 1950s or 60s, maybe even 1940s. But the dialogue is fairly modern, and we have certain aspects here that just make it feel more modern. That makes this movie a steampunk, retro, future, war fantasy film. I'm not sure if a movie like that has ever existed before. But, you say, where's the steampunk come in? In the land of the clouds, Newalt, Jack's dad, has been living in a flying castle. Now, a flying castle might not sound that steampunky. What if I told you the flying castle is made up of gears? And you can see them, and how they work, how they connect, and they're constantly spinning and keeping the castle in motion in the air. It looks very steampunky. And, of course, the robot exoskeleton thing has a very sort of steampunk sci-fi vibe that the rest of the film doesn't quite have. But it's awesome. I'm not complaining not knowing what time period this movie takes place in. I'm not complaining that I'm not totally sure the exact actual genre for the film outside of action, because it combines these things in such a unique and interesting way that one of the first things we see in the film is that robo-exoskeleton. And one of the first things we see in the land of the clouds is the flying castle. That at a certain point, you just accept them. And they become part of the film's visual terminology and motifs. And it makes it unlike anything I've seen before or really since. And that makes it really cool and has a ton of rewatchability because of that. Helping with that is literally almost everything else. To wit, Jane March plays Serena. She's probably the most well-known name in the cast, except for maybe Ben Cross, who's also in the movie. Serena has a really interesting story and character arc that I don't want to ruin, so I won't. Suffice to say, she does it really, really well. If you recall in my Grimm's Snow White video, I referenced that she could be playing the same character, only one in the land of the clouds, then on Earth, and, you know, that sort of thing. Having rewatched Jack the Giant Killer for this review, I slightly take it back. You could still draw strong parallels between the two, but she plays it much more calm and less completely evil here than she did in that other movie. And again, some of the stuff that happens at the end changes her characterization quite a bit, but she's really good. And she's a lot of fun, and she and Harry Dyer have really good chemistry, which is critical to the movie's ending working. As Jack, Jamie Atkins is fairly good. He has a great gung-ho spirit and vibe about him that really makes him likable and easy to root for. Some of his line deliveries are a little flat. Not all of them. There are moments where he's really good, especially when he's on screen with Vicky Glover, who plays his friend Lisa. But there are times where it's clear he's acting against nothing. It's just a CGI monster or something, and he's not totally sure what it'll look like or how big it'll be or something like that. So it's not totally believable there. But that's a minor complaint, really. Then there's Ben Cross, who plays an agent on the ground named Hinton, who has dealt with the Stalks before, so he's sort of the expert for the government here. And he's really funny, intentionally so, I should add. In Grindel, he plays the king, but while he's good there, I mean, it's Ben Cross, he's saddled with a very serious tone and a very serious character. So it's really fun to see him get to bring levity and play everything with a light-hearted touch. There's a line delivery once Serena comes down to Earth and demands that the humans be subjected to her will and bow down to her. That is probably my favorite thing Ben Cross has ever said. If I can find just that video clip, I'll embed it in here for you guys to watch. But I can't do accents, I can't do impressions, I won't do it for you, but it's great. Then there's Vicky Glover, who I love in this film. She has a limited role as the best friend Lisa, which is kind of cool that she's a best friend to a guy, and that she's really into robotics and stuff. She's helping him with the robot exoskeleton thing. That's a lot of fun. She's great. She's wonderful. She has this fierce energy about her when you watch her that she just commands the screen when you see her. And that's really cool and fun to watch. John Campling gets to play a very crazy, neurotic, you can't really pin him down character who almost feels like 3 or 4 different characters that they just wrote for one actor. Like they combined all the roles so they wouldn't have to pay the Zombie King a ton of money for 2 scenes. But that's kind of what makes his character so fun. You can't quite place him. You can't quite figure out what he's thinking. You can't quite figure out his character motivations. And oddly enough, that works in the movie's favor, as John Campling plays him just crazy enough for you to believe that any idea he gets is the next best idea that character has ever had. As the parents to Jack, well, stepdad and mom, Nigel and Sharon, Julian Boot and Hanya Windsor are good. They feel like real concerned parents and that sort of thing, but their chemistry together is only so-so, and that kind of brings things down. Finally, we get to Harry Dyer, who I love in this movie. From his first scene, he sees Jack and he just stares at him for a moment. You're like, I recognize you. He's not saying that, so you can just see it in his eyes. I recognize you. What, huh? Because he doesn't totally understand that he's been gone for 19 years, not 19 days yet. He's great to watch. He brings just the right amount of seriousness and playfulness and really holds his own in the action. And it's great fun to watch. However, none of that are the greatest things about the film. The cinematography by Mark Atkins. As you can see, Mark Atkins likes to do a lot of things, and normally he's very good at those things. Especially when you can tell he's really invested in the story he's watching. Cinematography is outstanding and awesome. However, the score by Chris Ridenhour, who you've all heard me gush over time and time again, and I will not stop, because he and Chris Cano are some of the best things to ever happen to the Asylum. It's also co-written by Andrew Morgan Smith, and the score is freaking phenomenal. It's very light, but it still has this big fantasy scope, almost almost ethereal, if you will, that really does work for the movie. The special effects are good. The giant dog-like creatures, who do look like redone versions of the dogs in Almighty Thor and Grim Snow White and a few other films from around that time period, which is a bit of a disappointment. They look really good. They're big, they have weight, they have varying bones and horns and stuff, so they all look different. It's not just a copy and paste job. And that's really cool and fun. And the main one that they fight at the end is especially impressive. The way it moves and the way its muscles twitch when it's lying on the ground look really cool and fun. And then we get to the most interesting part of the film. The freaking robot exoskeleton is used in a fight against the giant dog dinosaur thingamabobber. It's so cool. It's awesome. A dinosaur dog-like fantasy creature fights a mech, basically, that has a flamethrower attached to it. What more do you want in a movie? Nothing, I tell you, nothing. Ever. I'll be overselling it a bit, but it is just so much fun. The lighting is really good, but there are a few issues. It's clear that some of the shots were taken either after the fact as quick insert shots, or were just filmed on the studio versus being outside, and they don't always match up, especially during the ending fight. And that's a bit of a disappointment. And Serena, because of the arc her character does take, her motivations seem off. Her character arc has a really strong, poignant end, and it's a nice resolution to her character, but her coming down and demanding certain things don't totally work, because what would she have done if she got them? And that's never really answered or figured out, which is kind of frustrating. But I really don't want to badmouth the movie too much, as I love it. This was one of the first movies I saw, along with like Nazis at the Center of the Earth and such, that from this time period in the Asylum filmography, that showed they were upping their game in a big way, in a dramatic way, in a way that they wanted to stay to compete, and they wanted to keep making the sorts of movies they wanted to make. B-movie creature features that people at the built-in audience would enjoy. But they got more money. They got slightly better talent. Or in some cases, much better talent. And it all paid off. Despite the few small issues and some plot holes and shot continuity errors, this movie is great. And is better than Jack the Giant Slayer. Just from a sheer objective standpoint, it makes more sense. The plot is much leaner and more coherent. The action, for the kind of movie it is and the budget it had, is just as good. And the acting is also just as good. So I tell you, check it out. The Asylum rarely let you down. And Jack the Giant Killer is definitely one of their best. Until next time, I've been Bobby, and thank you for watching.